Okay, guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, there are three things that are absolutely inevitable in this life, okay? And that's death, taxes, and Anthony Smith's continuous stream of delusion that flows like a never-ending waterfall. I mean, truly, if Anthony Smith was not a functioning member of society in the sense that he has a very good job and a family, he would probably be deemed a schizophrenic and put in a facility somewhere, okay? It's not all just Anthony Smith, though. We also get an insane amount of sweeping from his friends and co-workers like Michael Bisping, Paul Felder, and Dean Thomas, who are all supposed to be somewhat of an analyst in the world of mixed martial arts. And I believe that the way they view the Anthony Smith situation, the way they talk about it, really brings into question their credibility, at least in terms of being an objective analyst. And that's what we're going to take a look at in this video today, is the response to Anthony Smith's recent loss at UFC 310 to Dominick Reyes, which was by TKO in the second round. We're going to take a look at Anthony Smith's response to this, as well as the people I mentioned just a moment ago. First, I want to address the elephant in the room, okay? I am fully aware that Anthony Smith's coach and longtime friend passed away, and that is very sad, okay? I'm not diminishing that. And this is going to turn some people off, but I will say, it seems to me like Anthony Smith just immediately turned it into an excuse as soon as he lost to Dominick Reyes. And one, I think that's a disservice to your coach. I don't think that any coach or any person, for that matter, that was close to you would want to be used as an excuse for your failings or shortcomings post their death. It seems pretty fucking rude if you ask me, okay? But also, it seems like Anthony Smith is just so comfortable making excuses that it was the immediate default. He's like the guy that calls into work 10 times a month, and every time it's a different story. One day his car broke down. Next time he's sick, or he threw his back out. The next time, he's got a flat tire. The next time a pipe burst in his house. At a certain point, you're like, holy fuck, bud. Is this guy either the most unlucky guy of all time, or he's a liar? Do you know what I mean? So I'm not going to berate him for the coach thing, but I'm also not going to hold back on the rest just because of his coach passing away, okay? People die all the time. It's a sad reality, okay? And like the great homosexual ballet dancer, rapper, philosopher Tupac once said, life goes on.
Watching the fight happen, and I forgot who texted me. Somebody from ESPN, one of the higher ups at ESPN, was like, how's he doing? I said, he's surprisingly doing really well. I didn't like watching you do that walkout. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was like, he's surprisingly doing really well.
Well,
And
I got impatient. Like I just wanted something to fucking happen.
yeah,
And I just forced it,
yeah.
I forced
I
it.
felt that too. Like you were doing so well, and then just got impatient.
Yeah, I just got impatient. Like nothing was happening. Like he wasn't engaging. He wasn't like, I don't know. Like I seen everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the worst part too. I was in there and like, God damn, you're not that good.
Yeah, that's what honestly
And
I
then
felt like you were the better guy.
and
I
then
was
it,
like, this is Anthony can win this fight.
and then it hit me like, fuck, maybe I'm not either. Like,
All right, so almost immediately we get pure delusion and cope from Anthony Smith here, but we do get a brief moment of self-awareness towards the end, which I'll talk about in just a second. But first, I want to touch on Anthony Smith saying that he got impatient because nothing was happening and that Dominick Reyes was almost refusing to engage with the fight. This is absolutely fucking mental, okay? It actually makes me concerned for Anthony Smith's mental state, and I say that sincerely, okay? I just don't understand why, when fighters make shit up, they don't at least do a little bit of work to make up better excuses, because all one needs to do to show what an absolute fucking nutter this guy is, okay? Either that or he's a compulsive liar, is look up the stats, okay? And if you do that, you will see Dominick Reyes landed 100 significant strikes more than Anthony Smith and threw almost 200 more total strikes than Anthony Smith. So who in reality, who in the fight was the one being inactive and not engaging, okay? That's absolutely insane that you've got a guy that like quadrupled you on strikes and or at least thrown, and you're saying that he didn't want to engage, okay? That's absolutely mental. But and by the way, this wasn't just at the moment that Smith decided he wanted to be finished. This was basically start to finish, Dominick Reyes more than doubled up on Anthony Smith in significant strikes in the first round. And then in the second round, I mean, Anthony Smith didn't land or throw a single fucking strike. So what are we talking about here, my guy? You know, but either way, let's continue on with the rest of this clip.
Maybe I'm not either anymore, you know? Yeah, but I seen everything. Like the left hand wasn't nearly as fast as I expected it to be. I think I over predicted how good he was going to be on his feet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he landed a shot here or there, and then at some point where I was just like, "Fucking hit me," or something. Like I need to fucking feel something. Like, give me something here. You know what I mean?
We all saw that. What was going through your head when that happened?
Theo Vaughn, who everyone knows, obviously, had this thing that he said one time, and he said it was a long thing that he was talking about, but at one point he said, "At least if I damage myself, then I'm the one doing it, and not letting the world do it." And that's kind of how I felt. Like, I needed to feel something other than what I've been feeling.
Okay, now I am very aware that I'm going to come off a little mean here, all right, because there's going to be some people that attribute this to Anthony Smith's coach passing away, and all of this behavior is going to be explained away by that situation specifically. But the problem is that this is kind of how Anthony Smith acts after every single fight. It's just like I said earlier, he's got a different excuse every time he does it, and this one might seem a little bit more, legitimate to a lot of people than maybe some of the other ones, and also pulls on the heartstrings a little bit. But I will say, okay, that has to be top 10, one of the corniest fucking things I've ever heard a fighter say in my life. First of all, I mean, it sounds like the ramblings of a person who is on the verge of some sort of, self harm or so, which listen, is no laughing matter. Okay, that's why I said earlier I'm genuinely concerned for Anthony Smith's mental state. But he sounds like a fucking emo teenager from the early 2000s on his way to like a My Chemical Romance concert. Okay, and second, it doesn't make sense or apply to this scenario that he was just currently in. Is Dominick Reyes you in this fucking analogy, Anthony Smith, or what? Because if not, my guy, you did exactly what you were trying to say you weren't doing. You did not damage yourself. You quite literally allowed the world around you, who in this analogy, the proper analogy, by the way, is Dominick Reyes, to damage you. So what the fuck are you talking about? And why is Dean Thomas just going along with this and not getting on the phone with a fucking medical professional on some like mandatory reporting type shit? Okay, mind-blowing to me. But I also want to point out that this is Anthony Smith's way of making quitting during a fight appear badass and like going out on your shield. Like, no, bro, you don't get it. I wanted to lose. I didn't quit, bro. I resigned. I put in my 2 weeks notice. I'm going out on my terms. I'm not letting the world get me down. No, motherfucker, you quit. Okay? Like TJ Dillashaw said you do. And you unfriended Rampage Jackson over it. It's insane to me. Mid-fight, you assumed the turtle position. You kind of look like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, but that's besides the point, okay? Like you've done in a ton of your losses, by the way. You assumed the turtle position, and you just give up, essentially. But in this situation, you've got I was asking him to punch me in the face. This sounds like a fucking, like a 15-year-old who's trying to act hard around his friends. Like, hit me, bro. What are we doing here, okay? Dominick Reyes was better than you. A fucking period. What he's doing right now is literally the on paper meme, right? Well, if all of these things that didn't happen, I would have beat him. I'm actually better than that guy. Fucking crazy. Either way, I want to move on to what Michael Bisping and Paul Felder were saying about this loss, because at this point, I'm starting to think that Michael Bisping wants to get rid of Anthony Smith, and I have no evidence for this whatsoever. This is just pure speculation, but I couldn't fathom another reason as to why you would want your close friend to continue down the very long road Anthony Smith has been on to the world of CTE. Okay, I mean, when is enough gonna be enough? But something I've noticed is every time Anthony Smith loses, he takes a little bit of a hiatus from the show, at least recently. And I think that Bisping actually likes this at this point, you know. Bisping used to push back on some of Anthony Smith's delusions and excuses, but now he feeds into them. And, you know, I think that Cyborg is up to something. So I'll roll the clip for you guys right now.
It was a rough one to watch, man, because it was obvious from anybody that knows him, anybody that watched, that's not normally how Anthony Smith would enter an octagon, emotionally, just seemingly not where you want to be in a mental state to be getting ready for a fight, especially against a guy like Dominick Reyes, who's really trying to use Anthony Smith to make a name off of himself again, to climb back up into those rankings. And you could tell he's still hurting, man. He's beyond still grieving. And
just jump in there, Paul, because obviously I was in the crowd. I wasn't watching on TV. And I saw that Dominick Reyes afterwards said that he was asking Reyes. No, Dominic said Anthony was asking to be punched in the face so he could feel something. Did that come through on the microphone?
I didn't hear necessarily exactly what was said, but you could see that he was yelling stuff and putting his hands down and just wanting to get punched in the face. I didn't know it was so that he could, you know, quote, that he could feel something, but it was obvious that he just, you know, pardon my language, he didn't give a shit.
All right, now immediately we get the same excuses we were talking about a little bit earlier in this video. So Paul Felder and Michael Bisping are basically going to attribute this entire loss to the fact that Anthony Smith's coach passed away. And I'm not saying that that did not have an effect on his mental state, but what I am saying is that all of these guys that are supposed to be, you know, objective analysts in the sport, people who fans listen to for their takes on mixed martial arts, and then we'll go parrot them back to whoever, you know, you've got these guys just completely and totally diminishing Dominick Reyes and acting, though, you know, they're acting as if Anthony Smith wanted to lose and this was like his desired outcome. So Dominick Reyes didn't actually beat Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith beat Anthony Smith, and that just drives me crazy, man, because they're still acting. I don't understand where this narrative comes from, that you're name building when you beat Anthony Smith. Okay, at this point, that is not a thing. Every ounce of muscle in this guy's body has appeared to have gone away. You know, he hasn't looked the same in a very long time. And if we're being quite frank, Dominick Reyes, in my opinion, reached larger or higher heights of the sport than Anthony Smith did. We have a common opponent between the two of John Jones, obviously. And in my opinion, Dominick Reyes beat John Jones, whereas Anthony Smith, you know, could have, I guess, kind of beat John Jones via DQ because he got the shit beat out of him so bad and eventually got illegally kneed. So I don't understand where this narrative is coming from, that Dominick Reyes is trying to build a name off of Anthony Smith as if he's not an established name himself, right? And, you know, has had similar losing streaks to Anthony Smith. So it's just, it's strange to me. But of course, and then we're going with the whole, oh, did he really? He asked to be punched in the face, buddy. You know, could that get picked up on the microphone? And it's like, bro, what? Who gives a fuck? This is, it's annoying to me that Anthony Smith gets to just act as though he lost this fight on purpose. He wanted to feel something. He went in there and it was a form of self-harm. And if all of these fucking people, by the way, believe that, I was kind of half joking when I said it about Dean Thomas, but if all of these people, all of Anthony Smith's friends, are believing Anthony Smith's story of self-harm, they should genuinely be, you know, trying to get him fucking help and not talking like they want to see him fight again.
Screaming at the TV, put your effing hands up. Like, what are you doing? Because he had moments and he was being aggressive. That was the one thing that I was looking at in a positive. Like, I'm like, he's going for it. At least maybe this will bring that out of him. He won't sit and wait around. He's going to go after it. But ultimately, he was just taking too many shots. And you could tell he didn't necessarily want to be in there.
All right, now, I just threw this little bit in here because I didn't notice it until I was just watching it back right now in preparation for this video. But Paul Felder essentially admits that Anthony Smith quit in this fight. And it's just strange to me because when a guy like TJ Dillashaw says it, maybe a little bit more bluntly, okay, than Paul Felder did right here, Anthony Smith all of a sudden has a problem with everybody at the Jackson podcast, even though TJ Dillashaw was correct. In my opinion, he was giving his honest opinion, which is, you know, hilarious to see Anthony Smith get upset at when that's what happens to him on a regular basis. And that's always his excuse, is that he's being an analyst, right? But here we have Paul Felder saying, like, I was screaming, get your hands up, and he was glad that he was being aggressive and going forward and stuff, and Anthony Smith was kind of doing that, although as we saw from the stats, he wasn't doing a whole lot with that aggression. But then towards the end, at the end there, Paul Felder says, you could tell that he just didn't want to be in there, which is the definition of quitting. Okay, I just wanted to point that out because I highly doubt that Anthony Smith is all of a sudden going to have a problem with Paul Felder, even though, it was a real fucking issue when little old TJ said it. Just wanted to throw that in there, but let's get back to the clip.
I don't think he will retire. I think when he watches that back, he's going to be, and I'll choose my words carefully, but I know the emotions of a fighter. I think he's going to be embarrassed when he watches that, and that's going to fuel him to want to come back and fight again. And I would like to see him fight again because I don't believe that the world deserves to remember him like that. That wasn't Anthony at his best. And again, I'll say this, and maybe I'll owe him an apology. I thought that when he took his shirt off at the prep point, I thought he doesn't look to be in shape, which I kind of get because he's had so many distractions. You got the grieving process, then you got the funeral, then there's so many stages of grief that you go through when somebody passes away, somebody that close. The last thing you're thinking about is training twice a day, eating the right food, going for a massage, focusing on your recovery, meditation, and all that type of stuff. No, you're like, okay, I'll show up, I'll do my job, I'll make weight, which he almost didn't, and then go and kick some ass. But
okay, so I understand Michael Bisping is trying to be an empathetic friend here, all right, by, talking about all the things that Anthony Smith went through leading up to this fight. But at a certain point, we need to these are just excuses, right? They are excuses. And it's funny because, I get that he's his friend, but Michael Bisping, this is the same guy that just on Saturday night, Vitor Petrino versus Dustin Jacoby, called out Vitor Petrino's coach for bringing up the fact that he had torn his ACL leading up to the Anthony Smith fight, and he called it an excuse, as he rightly should. And he oftentimes does when fighters make excuses, unless it's Anthony Smith. And it's not just for this excuse, by the way, but they're just basically writing off this entire performance to that matter, as if we haven't seen Anthony Smith perform basically exactly like this in his last few fights, obviously excluding the Vitor Petrino fight himself. But, what the fuck where I don't understand where this idealized version of Anthony Smith today, as he is, comes from Michael Bisping here. You are not going to get the best Anthony Smith ever again, unfortunately. That's a sad reality maybe for some, but he is old, okay? And Bisping points out the fact that he looked out of shape. This is not a new thing. Anthony Smith has looked out of shape for the last few fights, and that's because as he's aging, his muscle mass is diminishing, okay? So it's very strange to me that Michael Bisping is here encouraging his friend to go out and take more damage. And like I said, if he's truly at the point where he is self-harming himself, which I don't necessarily believe, I think that was a coping mechanism for losing the fight. But if you truly believe that, if you're buying into that, you should not be encouraging him to go take more damage, okay? This is fucking insane.
But I'd like to see him fight again. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, when he took the gloves off too, I was like, okay, he's going to be done. This is going to be it. But the way that he felt and the way that he was talking in that post-fight interview, I agree. I don't think that's going to be it. I know Dana probably wants a lot of those guys in the card that were nearing the end of their career to retire, but I think if it's up to him, he would have one more. And if he does do one more, I think it should be one more, and I think he should go all in on it and win, lose, or draw. Just have a good camp, have a good process, and have a good mindset going into it. You don't want – it's such an emotional moment. You just want to be done with it. You're sick of the sport when you lose a coach like that, when you're going through all that, and you could feel all of that. He felt like that's what he should do, but I think he needs to think about it. And I wouldn't mind seeing Anthony fight again on a better camp where he's not going through all that.
And we basically have Paul Felder expressing the exact same sentiment, although he did say earlier that he felt a sense of relief almost when he saw Anthony Smith taking off his gloves, which in my opinion, if you're friends with the guy, is the correct response to him possibly retiring, because at this point you're just damaging him further. And, I'm not emotionally attached to somebody like Anthony Smith. I don't care, but I also don't like seeing fighters, get to the point where they're gonna be drooling when they're older and things like this. Now, Anthony Smith is very well spoken, okay, and he doesn't seem to have a whole lot of CTE, although some of his takes, you know, that might beg the question. But I just you know, I don't understand this. What if you know, I'm not trying to be a dickhead here, but where was this dead coach for the Khalil Roundtree fight? Where was the dead coach for the Roman Dolidze fight? Where was the dead coach for, you know, all of these fights that he has not been looking great in, right? Even if we take a look at the fights he's won. Now, the Vitor Petrino fight was a good win, and actually I picked him to win that fight despite a lot of people obviously picking Vitor Petrino. He was a huge underdog, but we're looking at Magomed Ankalaev. We're looking at the Johnny Walker loss where he got absolutely fucking brutalized by a guy who was, you know, that, you know, safe to say that loss hasn't aged all that well. I think that the two Ryan Spann fights are a great indicator of how much he's going downhill and how fast he is rolling, essentially, right? Ryan Spann, I picked him to win that fight as well. Submitted him in the first round, okay? And then we have him fight him a few years later, and I picked him to win that fight as well, and he did, but fucking barely, you know, by a hair, split decision win over Ryan Spann. So even in the fights that he's winning, you can see the diminishment of his skill set, of his body, of everything, right? In his last 7 fights, he's 5-2, okay? And we're looking at a few finishes mixed in there as well. So I don't know where this idealized version of Anthony Smith that they think still exists is. But if I was his friend, I'd be telling him no. And if I was his friend and he was telling me that he was essentially harming himself in the fucking octagon, I would be like, bro, you need to go see a therapist or something, because this is a problem, okay? So it's just crazy to me, the sweeping that goes on from these guys that proclaim to be objective analysts of the sport. And, you know, maybe it's an inherent conflict of interest that guys that work for ESPN also have podcasts together. I thought it was kind of weird that Dean Thomas said the higher-ups at ESPN were concerned for Anthony Smith, you know, in his fight. And I do get it, because they're coworkers, but it's a weird situation to me. And for whatever fucking reason, these guys who will call out excuses from almost any other fighter just refuse to do so when it is Anthony Smith. I feel like if a fighter was using this as an excuse that was not emotionally attached to Michael Bisping or had like a relationship with him, I think he'd be saying, bro, you shouldn't be using your dead coach as an excuse. It's kind of fucked up, you know? And that's just my take on it. Maybe I'm just cold and heartless, but who gives a fuck, okay? It's YouTube. So either way, like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.